Okay, ladies and gentlemen, you are welcome. So in the present video, we are going to look at the concept of pulmonary circulation. Introduction to pulmonary circulation. Pulmonary circulation is a process by which blood is transported from the heart to the lungs and back. So the transportation of blood from the heart to the lungs and from lungs to the heart is what you call pulmonary circulation. So it means that from here, ladies and gentlemen, to understand that when we are talking about pulmonary circulation, it means it means the transport of blood between the heart and the lungs only, or from the lungs to the heart only. So that is what pulmonary circulation means. And this pulmonary circulation is vital, or it plays a vital role in oxygenating blood and removing carbon dioxide. So remember, ladies and gentlemen, actually in our blood can contain both oxygen and carbon dioxide. So the major role of pulmonary circulation is oxygenating blood, is to make the blood with only oxygen, that is oxygenating blood, while also at the same time, pulmonary circulation, it involves in removing carbon dioxide. So let's say you have deoxygenated blood, that is the blood that it contains carbon dioxide. So it is actually the work of the pulmonary circulation to remove the carbon dioxide and attach it with the oxygen, thereby making it oxygenated blood. So this circulation is suffered from systematic circulation, which supplies blood to the rest of the body. So in the case of systematic circulation, it is the types of circulation that involve the transport of blood between the heart to the rest of the body, or between the rest of the body to the heart. So that is systematic circulation. So these are basically the two major types of circulation in the body. So then, of course, the next thing is actually the pathway of pulmonary circulation. So in the case of pathway of pulmonary circulation, it involves blood flows from the right ventricle of the heart through the pulmonary trunk. So it means that the blood, it flows from the right ventricle of the heart to the pulmonary trunk. So when it gets to the pulmonary tracts, then it will now, or it then travels via the pulmonary arteries to the lungs for gas exchange. So from the right ventricle of the heart, the blood will flow through the pulmonary trunk, and then it will now travels the lungs via pulmonary arteries, where a gas exchange takes place. So after that, after the oxygenation, then the blood will now returns to the left atrium of the heart through the pulmonary veins. So you see, ladies and gentlemen, it is very important now to understand something. In the case of the pathway of pulmonary circulation, the blood from the right ventricle, or from the right ventricle of the heart, will now travel to the pulmonary arteries through so it will now travels to the lungs through pulmonary trunk. And then, of course, this blood will now travel to the lungs via pulmonary arteries. And then the blood in the lungs will now undergo oxygenation. That is removal of carbon dioxide and loaded the blood with oxygen. And once the blood is loaded with oxygen, then it will now return back to the left atrium, to the left atrium of the heart through pulmonary veins. So this is actually, as you can see clearly, this is the pulmonary circulation, and from here, this is actually the pulmonary circulation. So in the pulmonary circulation from the right ventricle of the heart, the right ventricle of the heart, the blood will flow, as you can see it from here. It will now go to the lungs through the pulmonary artery. And then, of course, from the pulmonary artery in the lungs, the blood will now undergo oxygenation. And after the oxygenation, then the blood will now return back to the right atrium of the right atrium of the heart. So that is what actually happened. So it means that in the case of this pathway of pulmonary circulation, you shouldn't forget about the right ventricle, the pulmonary artery, and the right atrium. They are the most important organs that plays a vital role in pulmonary circulation. First, blood from the right ventricle, it will now move to the lungs via the pulmonary artery. And then from the pulmonary artery in the lungs, the blood will undergo oxygenation. And after that, it will now turn back. It will now go back to the heart. To now return to the heart exactly in the left atrium. So then now, pulmonary arteries and veins. Pulmonary arteries, as we can see, they carry oxygenated blood. They carried oxygenated blood from heart to the lungs. So it carries, of course, deoxygenated blood from the heart to the lungs. And then, of course, for the pulmonary veins, it transports oxygenated blood back to the heart. Because, of course, the oxygenation is taking place in the lungs. So after the oxygenation, then the blood will now travel back to the heart via pulmonary veins. And of course, the structural differences between these arteries and veins accommodate their specific functions in pulmonary circulation. So as we can see, the pulmonary artery, or the differences, of course, the pulmonary artery carries the oxygenated blood to the lungs, while pulmonary vein, it will now returns the oxygenated blood to the heart after oxygenation in the lungs. And then, of course, in the case of pulmonary artery, they have thick wall for high pressure, while, of course, in the case of pulmonary vein, they have, or it has a thin wall for low pressure. And then, of course, the branches of the pulmonary artery. So it branches into right and left pulmonary artery. And then, of course, for the pulmonary veins, it has 4 veins, 2 phalanx. And then, of course, there is low oxygen in the case of pulmonary artery with high carbon dioxide. So that is what happened in the case of pulmonary artery. While for the pulmonary vein, they have high oxygen and then low carbon dioxide, because after the oxygenation in the lungs, so the blood will have a high oxygen content with low carbon dioxide. And then, of course, pulmonary artery is essential for gas exchange, while pulmonary vein is critical for systematic circulation. So now, gaseous exchange process. So the gas exchange, it occurs in the alveoli of the lungs, where oxygen diffuses into blood. So the gaseous exchange, that the exchange of carbon dioxide and the exchange of carbon dioxide and oxygen, it occurs in the alveoli. And then simultaneously, carbon dioxide diffuses from blood into the alveoli for exhalation. So after the gaseous exchange, because we don't need carbon dioxide, then the carbon dioxide will now diffuse from the blood into the alveoli for the exhalation, that is to release it outside the body. So this is the alveoli where the gaseous exchange takes place, and as you can see, the oxygen is getting in, and then the carbon dioxide is going out, so it is exhaling. So that is actually what happened in the case of gaseous exchange. Then this process, of course, as we can see, this process of gaseous exchange is facilitated by the thin walls of the alveoli and the capillaries. As the exchange of the gas is facilitated by the thin walls of the of the alveoli and capillary. So this is thin wall of the alveoli, and of course the thin wall of the capillaries. So then the next thing is, of course, the regulation of circulatory or pulmonary circulation. So pulmonary blood flow is regulated by local factors such as oxygen level in the lungs. So such examples of the factors that are involved in the regulation of pulmonary blood flow include oxygen level. So oxygen level is very important in regulation of pulmonary blood flow or pulmonary circulation. And hypoxia, that is the low oxygen delivery, it causes vasoconstriction of pulmonary arteries, redirecting blood flow to better ventilated areas. So you should understand that if there is low oxygen in the environment or the low oxygen in the body, it causes vasoconstriction of the pulmonary arteries. So the pulmonary arteries will undergo vasoconstriction, so they will be constricted. And as a result of that constriction, it will now redirecting blood flow to a better ventilated areas. So neural and hormonal condition and hormonal controls also influence pulmonary vascular resistance. So as we can see, some of the regulatory mechanisms of pulmonary circulation include blood flow, that is cardiac output. So of course, minimal neural regulation is regulated by only venous return. And then we have also humoral influence, and then also we have local regulation. So these are actually regulatory mechanisms that are involved in regulation of pulmonary circulation. So now the next thing is actually the differences. So these are actually regulatory mechanisms of pulmonary circulation. Number one, there are local factors like oxygen levels that are very important in controlling pulmonary circulation. And there is also hypoxia, that is low oxygen delivery. It is also one of the factors that also contribute to pulmonary circulation in terms of the regulation. Also, there are neural and also hormonal controls. There are some hormones and also neural, like for example, the nervous system. It is also very important in controlling or in regulation of the pulmonary circulation. So now the next thing that we are going to look at is differences between pulmonary circulation and systematic circulation. So in the case of pulmonary circulation, it has a low pressure and resistance. So the pressure and the resistance is very low in pulmonary circulation compared to systematic circulation. And as we can see from here, this is systematic circulation and pulmonary circulation. So in the case of pulmonary circulation, there is actually the transportation of blood that flows from the heart to the lungs and also back to the heart. So actually blood transported from heart to the lungs or lungs to the heart in the case of pulmonary circulation. But in the case of systematic circulation, there is a transport of blood from heart to the rest of the body. And then, of course, in the case of pulmonary circulation, it involves the transportation of oxygenated bloods. Okay, sorry. In the case of pulmonary circulation, there is oxygenation of blood in the lungs. That is the removal of carbon dioxide and then addition of oxygen. So therefore, there is oxygenation of blood in the lungs in the case of pulmonary circulation. While in the case of systematic circulation, it delivers oxygen to the tissue. So that is what systematic circulation does. So it delivers oxygenated blood to the tissues. And then, of course, in case 3 here, of course, in the case of pulmonary circulation, it carries deoxygenated blood to the lungs. So from the heart, there is a transportation of deoxygenated blood to the lungs in the case of pulmonary circulation. So it means that it is deoxygenated blood that you are removing from the heart to the lungs. And then for the systematic circulation, it carries oxygenated blood to the organs. So in the case of systematic circulation, the oxygenated blood is transported from the heart to the other or to the rest of the organs of our body. And then, of course, for the pulmonary circulation, it uses pulmonary arteries and veins for the transportation, while in the case of systematic circulation, it uses aorta, arteries, veins, and capillaries for the transportation of oxygen, for the transportation of oxygenated blood from the heart to the rest of the body. So, and also very importantly, the right ventricle, it generates less force from blood through the pulmonary unit in the case of pulmonary circulation. So these differences between systematic and pulmonary circulation, it helps to protect the lungs from high pressure damage and maintains efficient gas exchange. So what are the common disorders of pulmonary circulation? So number one, we have pulmonary hypertension. So in the case of pulmonary hypertension, it involves elevated blood pressure within the pulmonary arteries. So in the pulmonary arteries, there is an elevated blood pressure within the arteries, and that subsequently leads to the pulmonary hypertension. And then, of course, we also have pulmonary embolism. Pulmonary embolism is also another pulmonary circulation disorders where there is a blood. So therefore, in the case of pulmonary embolism, it is actually one of the disorders of pulmonary circulation where there is a blockage which causes as a result of a blood clot in the pulmonary arteries. So these conditions can impair oxygen delivery and strain the right side of the heart. So these are actually some of the few disorders of pulmonary arteries. So then, conclusion and significance of this lecture. Pulmonary circulation is essential for maintaining proper oxygen and carbon dioxide levels in the body, and it also involves a specialized pathway that ensures efficient gas exchange in the lungs. So therefore, understanding pulmonary circulation is crucial for diagnosing and treating respiratory and cardiovascular diseases. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is where we are going to stop. Please don't forget to subscribe, follow, join, and subscribe to my YouTube channel.